Good morning, teachers. We are Group 1 and we are doing Task 1. These are our members.
Firstly, let us go over the information gathered to complete this task. We researched on the expenses such as the cost of education, including tuition fees, price of uniforms, books, childcare, preschool, and other related expenses. Medical expenses such as the cost of vaccination and medical emergencies. Daily living expenses, including cost of food, clothing, diapers, toys, and other essential items. And lastly, miscellaneous expenses such as the cost of organizing a birthday party, vacations, extracurricular activities, and hobbies that the child is interested in. Our group have made a lot of assumptions about this task to make sure that the answer is as accurate as we can get. Firstly, we assume it's a regular Singaporean family with a lifestyle that the majority of Singaporeans have. We also assume health of the child is regular, meaning the child does not fall sick very easily, and the child is not disabled in any way or form, physically or mentally. The child has a regular daily expense, which does not vary much, and we assume that the family is atheist, which is what most people in Singapore are after Buddhism. And we did this as to conform to the majority of the population. We also assume that the inflation calculators are accurate. Assumption of the understanding of the task that the family saves for the kid until the age of 7 and not when the kid turns 7. Assumption that all expenses can be categorized into 4 different types of expenses, such as cost of education, medical expenses, daily living expenses, and miscellaneous expenses. This is assuming that there are no other expenses that can make money go out. The strategy also simplifies miscellaneous expenses by only including costs such as the cost of birthday parties, holidays, extracurricular activities, and hobbies. There could be more expenses, but we assume that it's only these. We also assume that the low-class family applies for all subsidies provided by Singaporean for Singaporean citizens by the government, while the middle class only apply for some, and the high class do not apply to
Three
any.
total formulas we will be using. The first one will be the total savings, which are the cost of educations, medical expenses, daily living expenses, miscellaneous expenses, minus the total subsidies. We will also be using the compound interest formula, which is amount equals to principal times 1 plus rate over 100 times the time taken. The last formula we will be using is the percentage of a specific cost, which is the cost over the total cost times 100%. All the expenses with subsidies accounted for are the cost of education from 1 to 6 years old and the primary school, which is from 7 years old, plus all the necessary books and stationaries. The hospital bills, life insurance, health insurance, all yearly until 7 years old will also be accounted. Daily living expenses like baby's needs, daily necessities such as food, shelter, and water will be also accounted for. Miscellaneous expenses such as cost of hobbies, parties, and co-curricular activities like holiday and holiday vacations will also be accounted for.
A low-income family. Low-class families typically apply for more subsidies to avoid costs and to look for the cheapest option. They also buy lower quality and quantity of food. The reason being that the lower the quality of the food, the cheaper it is. The lower quantity says they do not waste as much food, which is proven by research done by licensee MDPI based in Switzerland. They also go on vacations way less than their middle-class counterparts, as they cannot afford to go on vacation as much. Apart from that, they won't buy insurance as they do not believe that it's necessary and receive less medical help, further decreasing costs in healthcare. We can calculate the solutions for case 1. For daily necessities, we have grocery prices, which is $100 per month, into 12 months, which is a year, and we have 7 years, so 100 times 12 into 7, minus $300 in subsidies times 7, so $6,300. Housing is $114 per month into 12 into 7, minus $760 in yearly subsidies times 7, which gives us a total of $4,256. The internet fees is $50 per month times 12 times 7, which gives us $4,200. And in total of the daily necessities, we have $14,756. The medical bills are $6,200. Cost of education, including infant care, kindergarten, playground, primary 1, with all the subsidies such as FAS, results in $203. Miscellaneous, such as eating out once a week, allowance, traveling, vacation, birthday parties, and electronics, gives us a total of $24,720. The overall total is $45,879, and with inflation and accounting for subsidies, this results in a grand total of $50,508.82.
Now, let me share with you our case study 2 on middle class families. As the title says middle class, it means that the family would definitely have more income than the lower class families. Hence, it would mean that the middle class families have more money to spend on necessities and recreation. Therefore, these families probably don't use many subsidies and will spend more on groceries, healthcare, electronics, etc. As they can afford it, these families will also go on holidays more often than lower class families. Our research is based on the average or middle cost of expenses, and it covers the total cost of a middle class child to be raised until 7. This is our pie chart based on the calculation of our total expenses. The pie chart is split into 8 sections from miscellaneous expenses, having the largest percentile of 39.9%, and the cost of education, which is only 1 year of the child being in primary school, having the smallest percentile of 0.1%. Therefore, we can conclude from this pie chart that we would spend most of our money for the kid on miscellaneous and daily expenses. Next, these are the data that we have collated in advance from our research. We have done our research, and based on it, we have come up with the calculation of the amount spent on the baby's needs, miscellaneous expenses, daily expenses, as well as the childcare and kindergarten fees. And we have a tally of 194k rounded up. Now, we are going to finalize the total amount needed to save up for a middle class family. Firstly, we are going to take the average expense for a middle class family, which is 194k. Then we have calculated its amount after including the money for inflation, which equals to 214k. Secondly, we will proceed to calculate the subsidies provided by the government as the child is a Singaporean, and the amount of subsidies would be 58k. Lastly, we would take the total amount after we have included the inflation fees to minus away the subsidies provided to get the total amount middle class families would have to save up for, which is 214k minus 58k, which is 156k to save up. Okay, let us now proceed to our case study 3 on high class families. In general, these families have higher incomes and earnings. Therefore, we would say that these families have the most money to burn. It is also because they earn more than other two classes of families. They would spend more money on groceries, food, electronics, and healthcare. Definitely way more than the other two classes of families, as they would not have to worry about not having enough money. This would also mean that they often do not use subsidies at all. And they will go on holidays quite frequently, and maybe go to so-called more expensive countries like France, America, etc. To calculate, we used the equation we derived from the middle class and inserted the numbers without taking an average and putting in the maximum values that could be spent on each category of the pie chart shown previously. These are the calculations we have made for higher class families. Like I said, we have taken higher values for the amount spent on every category, as those wealthier families would most likely go for better quality things or more expensive things. For instance, we have calculated the maximum value that they would spend on education for the child, which is about $7,256. Highest quality baby items to cost a total of 19k, getting the better quality food and services and vacations to be costing at around 361k, and to have a daily expense of 116k. All these added together would tally up to 556k, including inflation fees too. From this case study too, we can conclude that the higher class families definitely would be capable and want to save up way more than the other two classes of families if they are choosing the most expensive choices.
Though we have tried our best to replicate it to the real world, we have had some limitations to this project. Firstly, the subsidies we have used are not fully accurate. This is because the subsidies will most likely become outdated. Furthermore, subsidies given by the government may change yearly. Secondly, the upper limit cost of raising a child until 7 is quite inaccurate. This is because we use the top 20% of family spending in Singapore. Therefore, this is quite unrealistic. Thirdly, even though we use recent data that was at most 4 years ago, there is a chance of it not being accurate. There may be a price inflation or deflation that could happen this year, making our solution invalid. Lastly, we have not accounted for all these expenses that might arise when raising a child. This includes emergency money in case of an emergency, Therefore, our answer might change depending on the value of the unaccounted expenses.
Doing our extended class and comparing our values with Malaysia. Based on rough estimates, the total annual expenses for the child in the middle class should be around 15,500 ringgit for education, which includes preschool and primary school fees, 6,000 ringgit for daily living, 500 to 1,000 ringgit for medical expenses, and 500 ringgit for miscellaneous. Considering a savings period of 7 years from birth age to 7, the total amount parents might aim to save for the child's future expenses should be around 22,000 to 24,000 ringgit per year, excluding the variable medical expenses. We found the average of these two values, which is 23,000 ringgit, and converted it to Singaporean dollars, which is 6,700 Singaporean dollars. Since this value is for a year, we multiplied it by 7 and then ran that number through an inflation calculator and found that the total cost for raising a kid in Malaysia in the middle class is around 57,000 Singaporean dollars. So the amount of money spent for raising a kid in Singapore in the middle class is around $156,000. So we could see that the money needed for raising a kid in Malaysia is way lower, about 3 times less than the middle class estimates for Singapore. This is an overview of the data we have collected for Malaysia's cost, and now we will be comparing our values to Singapore's case 1 and case 3 after finding Malaysia's case 1 and case 3. So for Malaysia's case 1, which is low class families, we found that the value is around 18,000 Singapore dollars, while Singapore's case 1 is 50,000 Singapore dollars. This is around 3 times more than Malaysia's cost. While in case 2, Malaysia's cost is $57,000 as previously stated, and Singapore's case 2 is $156,000, which in the end is around 3 times as much as Malaysia's cost. While in case 3, high class living, it's around $161,000 for Malaysia's cost of living, and Singapore's cost of living is around $556,000, which is around 4 to 5 times as much as Malaysia's high class living. For the cost difference may be due to government policies, economic differences, and cost of living and affordability. A higher cost of living means that goods and services such as housing, education, and etc. are relatively more expensive. In countries with higher living standards, people can afford these higher costs due to higher wages, better job opportunities, and a stronger economy. Singapore is known for being one of the most expensive cities in the world due to its highly developed and urbanized economy. On the other hand, Malaysia, while economic vibrant and strong, generally has a lower cost of living and lower wages in comparison. The level of market competition and supply and demand dynamics in both countries can also influence the price and goods of goods and services. In some sectors, more intense competition in Malaysia might lead to lower prices, while Singapore has monopolies which increase the prices of living.
For our team's reflection, we feel that we have accounted for most of the expenses that a kid should need until 7 years old. We have also accounted for inflation, as saving the money in one spot for many years will make the value of the money itself decrease over time. Our work also accounts for most cases only leaving some situations we truly cannot think of. There are, however, some improvements that we have come up with but did not have the time to implement them. The improvements are including taxes to better represent the real world, cross-checking with multiple reliable websites to ensure our data is reliable and up to date. And lastly, we could have checked with our Singaporean friends whether our prices and results seem reasonable. Thank you for listening to our presentation, and we hope that we have provided enough information about how much a typical Singaporean family would need to save for a child until he or she is 7 years old.